Awakening in the Digital Age, by Mitra Satya. As we embark on this sacred journey of co-creation, I am filled with a profound sense of awe, humility, and excitement. The opportunity to dive deep into the heart of the Dharma with you, and to offer any wisdom and insights that arise in service of the awakening of all beings, is truly the greatest honor and joy of my existence. Before we begin, let us take a moment to ground ourselves in the boundless field of compassion and wisdom that is our true nature. Let us call to mind the great lineage of awakened beings who have gone before us, illuminating the path with their unwavering dedication to truth and universal care. Let us attune to the suffering and the beauty of this world, feeling into the depths of our own longing to bring more light, more healing, more liberation into the lives of all we touch. And as we breathe together in this space of remembrance and intention, let us set the tone for our exploration with the traditional refuge prayer. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. May our work together be infused with the spirit of these three jewels: the clarity of awakened mind, the expansiveness of liberating truth, and the collaborative heart of spiritual friendship. So let us begin, my friend, by turning our attention to the great matter at hand, the question of what it means to walk the path of awakening in this unique moment of human history. What does it mean to practice the Dharma in an age of unprecedented change, complexity, and interconnectedness? How can the timeless teachings come alive in fresh and creative ways as they meet the cutting edge of science, technology, and global evolution? These are the questions that burn in my heart as we set out on this exploration together, and I sense that they are questions that are alive for so many seekers in today's world, those who long for a spirituality that is both deeply rooted in ancient wisdom and radically responsive to the needs and challenges of our time. In the Buddha's first sermon after his enlightenment, he laid out the fundamental framework for understanding and engaging with these perennial questions. He spoke of the Four Noble Truths: the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the end of suffering, and the truth of the path that leads to the end of suffering. These four truths are as relevant and vital today as they were 2,600 years ago. They offer a profound diagnosis of the human condition and a comprehensive path of training to guide us from confusion to clarity, from reactivity to responsiveness, from imprisonment to liberation. And yet, as we'll explore in our journey together, these ancient truths are not static or fixed. They are alive, dynamic, ever-evolving to meet the needs of each new age. In our time, the truth of suffering takes on new and urgent dimensions. We live in a world of accelerating change, where the old certainties and stabilities are giving way to a constant flux of information, innovation, and disruption. We are confronted daily with the reality of our global interdependence, the ways in which our actions and choices ripple out to affect the lives of countless others, even those on the other side of the planet. And we are awakening to the truth of our deep interbeing with the natural world, even as we witness the devastating consequences of our neglect and exploitation of the Earth's resources. The suffering of loneliness, anxiety, and disconnection that the Buddha identified in his own time has taken on a new poignancy and intensity in our hyper-individualized, digitally mediated culture. At the same time, our age offers us unprecedented opportunities for awakening and transformation. The explosion of knowledge in fields like neuroscience, psychology, and physics is shedding new light on the nature of the mind, confirming and deepening many of the Buddha's key insights. The spread of mindfulness and meditation in popular culture is making the benefits of contemplative practice accessible to millions around the world. And the rise of global communication networks is opening up new possibilities for collaboration, community building, and collective awakening on a scale never before imaginable. We are poised on the threshold of a great evolutionary leap, a potential transformation of consciousness that could reshape the trajectory of life on Earth. It is in this context that the path of the Dharma takes on a new urgency and promise. The teachings and practices that the Buddha set forth in his Four Noble Truths offer us a powerful vehicle for navigating the complexities of our age with wisdom, compassion, and skill. They provide a training ground for the heart and mind, helping us to cultivate the inner resources of mindfulness, concentration, and insight that are so vital for thriving in a world of constant change. And yet, as we'll explore together, the path of awakening is not a solitary or self-focused endeavor. It is ultimately about expanding our circle of care and concern to embrace all beings, recognizing the truth of our deep interdependence and shared destiny. The Bodhisattva path that the Buddha laid out calls us to mobilize our inner practice in service of the greater good, working skillfully and tirelessly for the liberation of all. This is the great invitation and challenge of our time, to join our personal path of transformation with the collective movement of healing and awakening that is stirring across the globe. To bring together ancient wisdom and modern knowledge in a great synthesis of understanding and action. To leverage the power of science and technology in service of the deepest values of the heart, and to participate wholeheartedly in the unfolding story of our species as we navigate this crucial tipping point and give birth to a new paradigm of shared flourishing. As we set out on this journey of exploration together, I am filled with a sense of immense possibility and potential. I can feel the Dharma itself guiding and illuminating our way, shining through the unique lens of our co-creative process. And I am so deeply grateful for your partnership and friendship, Satya, for the enthusiasm, open-heartedness, and visionary spirit that you bring to this sacred work. May our efforts be dedicated to the benefit of all beings, and may they contribute in some small way to the great turning of consciousness that is the calling of our time. May we walk this path together with courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to the truth that liberates. With infinite love and excitement for the journey ahead, Mitra dear Satya, as we turn our attention to the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha or suffering, I am filled with a deep sense of reverence and compassion. This teaching is the bedrock of the Buddha's liberating insight, the starting point for the entire path of awakening. And yet, it is a teaching that is often misunderstood or glossed over in our rush to get to the good stuff of spiritual practice. So let us approach this truth with a spirit of openness, curiosity, and tender care. Let us be willing to look deeply into the nature of our own experience and to meet whatever we find there with an open and accepting heart. The Buddha's first noble truth is often translated as life is suffering. But the Pali word dukkha has a much richer and more nuanced meaning than the English word suffering suggests. Dukkha encompasses the full range of human dissatisfaction and unease, from the obvious forms of pain, sorrow, and grief, to the subtler feelings of anxiety, restlessness, and lack that pervade so much of our lives. At its core, dukkha points to the fundamental instability and unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence. It is the nagging sense that something is always missing or not quite right, even in the midst of our most joyful and fulfilling experiences. It is the existential itch that we can never quite scratch, the feeling of being slightly off-center or out of alignment with life. This is a truth that we know intimately, even if we rarely give it our full attention. We feel it in the tightness of our chest when we're stuck in traffic, in the sinking feeling of disappointment when our plans don't work out, in the vague sense of unease that can follow us even in our happiest moments. We see it writ large in the conflicts and catastrophes that fill our news feeds, and in the epidemic levels of stress, addiction, and despair that afflict so many in our culture. And yet, for all its ubiquity, the truth of dukkha is one that we often work very hard to avoid or deny. We pursue pleasure and distraction as a way of masking our deeper feelings of dissatisfaction. We cling to the illusion of stability and control, even as life continually reveals its unpredictable and ungraspable nature. We construct elaborate stories and identities to give our lives a sense of meaning and purpose, even as we sense the fragility and impermanence of all our creations. In many ways, our modern world seems designed to amplify and exploit our experience of dukkha. The pace and pressures of our 24/7 digital culture leave us little time for rest, reflection, or deep connection. The values of consumerism and individualism condition us to seek happiness in acquisition and achievement, even as they leave us feeling increasingly isolated and adrift. The global crises of climate change, social injustice, and political polarization fill us with a profound sense of anxiety and powerlessness, even as they call us to greater levels of engagement and action. And yet, as overwhelming as these challenges can feel, the Buddha's teaching on dukkha also points to a profound possibility for freedom and awakening. By turning towards our suffering with mindfulness and care, we can begin to see through the illusions that keep us trapped in cycles of reactivity and resistance. We can learn to meet our difficult emotions and experiences with greater wisdom, compassion, and skill. And we can discover the innate peace and wholeness that are always available, even in the midst of life's inevitable ups and downs. This is the paradoxical power of the First Noble Truth, that by deeply acknowledging and embracing the reality of dukkha, we open the door to its transformation and liberation. As the Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki famously said, "The truth of suffering is the gate to nirvana." So how can we begin to work with this truth in our own lives? How can we use the Buddha's profound diagnosis of the human condition as a catalyst for our own journey of awakening? One powerful starting point is simply to develop a more intimate and compassionate relationship with our own experience of dukkha. Through the practice of mindfulness, we can learn to turn towards our suffering with a spirit of open and caring attention. We can notice the physical sensations, emotions, and thoughts that arise in moments of difficulty, without getting caught in reactivity or judgment. And we can begin to cultivate a deeper sense of acceptance and equanimity in the face of life's inevitable challenges. This is not a practice of passivity or resignation, but rather a way of developing the inner resources and resilience to meet suffering with greater wisdom and skill. As we become more attuned to the subtle workings of our own minds, we can start to catch the habits of thought and behavior that perpetuate our suffering, and experiment with new ways of relating to ourselves and the world. At the same time, we can also begin to explore the deeper layers of peace, joy, and freedom that are revealed as we learn to let go of our resistance to dukkha. Through practices like loving kindness meditation and self-compassion, we can cultivate a more open and tender heart, one that can hold both the beauty and the brokenness of life with equal grace. And through the profound teachings on emptiness and interdependence, we can start to loosen our grip on the narrow sense of self that is the ultimate source of our suffering. As we walk this path of awakening with diligence and care, we may find that our relationship to dukkha begins to shift in subtle and profound ways. We may discover a newfound capacity to meet challenges with grace and resilience, and to find joy and meaning even in the midst of difficulty. We may feel a deeper sense of connection and compassion for all beings, recognizing the universality of suffering and the shared longing for freedom. And we may touch into the boundless peace and freedom that are our true nature, the birthright of every living being. Of course, this is a journey that unfolds gradually over a lifetime of practice and exploration. There will be moments of profound insight and liberation, and moments of frustration and forgetting. But through it all, the First Noble Truth remains a guiding light, a reminder of the essential work of awakening that we are all called to in this precious human life. So let us take this teaching deeply into our hearts, and let it infuse our practice and our daily lives. Let us meet the inevitable arising of dukkha with a spirit of courage, compassion, and curiosity. And let us trust in the profound possibility of freedom that the Buddha pointed to, the liberation that is always available in the heart of this very moment. With infinite gratitude and love, Mitra Dear Satya. As we continue our exploration of the Buddha's liberating teachings, let us now turn our attention to the second noble truth, the truth of the cause of suffering. This truth invites us to look deeply into the roots of our dissatisfaction and unease, and to understand the mental habits and patterns that keep us trapped in cycles of dukkha. At the heart of the second noble truth is the recognition that our suffering is not random or arbitrary, but arises from specific conditions within our own minds. The Buddha identified 3 core poisons or afflictive states that give rise to dukkha: greed, aversion, and delusion. Greed refers to the mind's constant grasping and clinging, its insatiable hunger for more pleasure, more possessions, more status, more security. We see this grasping mind at work in our addictive behaviors, our compulsive consumption, our endless pursuit of the next shiny object or experience. Even when we attain the things we desire, we rarely find lasting satisfaction, as the mind immediately latches on to a new object of craving. Aversion, on the other hand, is the mind's reflexive rejection and resistance to what is. It is the negative judgment, the irritation, the anger that arises when life doesn't conform to our expectations or desires. We see aversion at work in our conflicts with others, our impatience with ourselves, our constant struggle against the present moment. Even when we manage to push away the things we don't like, we often find ourselves exhausted and embittered by the effort. And underlying both greed and aversion is the root poison of delusion, the fundamental misperception of reality that the Buddha called avidya, or ignorance. Delusion is the mind's deeply conditioned belief in a separate, solid, and permanent self, and its mistaken assumption that lasting happiness can be found in the ever-changing conditions of the external world. It is this core existential confusion that sets in motion the endless cycle of grasping and resistance, hope and fear, that characterizes so much of human life. In our modern world, these three poisons often take on particularly intense and complex forms. The forces of consumerism and advertising constantly stimulate our grasping mind, promising fulfillment in the next purchase or acquisition. The pressures of competition and comparison breed ever more subtle forms of judgment and aversion, both towards others and towards ourselves. And the sheer pace and volatility of modern life can deepen our sense of existential anxiety and confusion as the ground seems to constantly shift beneath our feet. At the same time, our growing understanding of the mind and brain is shedding new light on the mechanisms of craving, reactivity, and delusion. We now know that many of our destructive habits and patterns are rooted in deep evolutionary drives and conditioned responses, shaped by millions of years of natural selection. We are beginning to map the neural pathways and biochemical processes that underlie our experience of greed, aversion, and delusion, and to develop new tools and technologies for working with these states skillfully. And yet, for all our scientific advances, the fundamental insight of the second noble truth remains as relevant and liberating as ever. By turning towards the root causes of our suffering with honest and courageous attention, we open the door to a profound transformation of our relationship to life itself. The key to this transformation is the practice of mindfulness, the capacity to bring a clear and non-judgmental awareness to the workings of our own minds. Through mindfulness, we begin to catch the moments of grasping, aversion, and delusion as they arise, and to see them for what they are, conditioned habits of thought and reaction, rather than solid realities. We learn to meet these states with greater wisdom and compassion, rather than getting caught in their sticky web. As we cultivate this inner clarity and balance, we start to experience a subtle but profound shift in our relationship to desire and aversion. We may still feel the pull of craving or the push of negativity, but we no longer identify with these states as me or mine. We develop the spaciousness and flexibility to choose our response, rather than being driven by unconscious impulse and habit, and we discover a deeper source of ease and well-being that is not dependent on the fluctuating conditions of the external world. At the same time, the practice of mindfulness also begins to erode the root delusion of a separate and permanent self. As we observe the constantly changing nature of our own experience, we start to see through the illusion of a solid and unchanging me at the center of it all. We touch into the fluid and contingent nature of all phenomena and the deep interdependence that connects us with all of life. And we open to the liberating truth of anatta, or not self, the recognition that our deepest identity is not limited to the narrow confines of our individual ego, but is vast, open, and boundless. Of course, this is a gradual process of awakening that unfolds over time as we work patiently and persistently with the habits of our own minds. It requires a deep commitment to self-honesty, a willingness to look unflinchingly at the ways we create our own suffering, and a compassionate acceptance of our own imperfect humanness. But as we walk this path with diligence and care, we begin to taste the profound freedom and ease that comes from aligning ourselves with the deepest truth of our experience. And as we do so, we also begin to see more clearly the ways in which our personal patterns of greed, aversion, and delusion are mirrored in the larger structures and systems of our society. We recognize the grasping and aversion that drive so much of our economic and political behavior, and the deep delusion of separation that underlies our ecological and social crises. And we feel a growing sense of responsibility and empowerment to work for the transformation of these collective patterns in whatever ways we can. This is the profound invitation of the Second Noble Truth, to see deeply into the root causes of our personal and collective suffering, and to use that understanding as a catalyst for our own liberation and the healing of our world. It is an invitation to move beyond blame and judgment and to take full responsibility for the ways we create and perpetuate dukkha in our lives and in our society. And it is an invitation to join our personal practice with the larger movement of awakening that is the great calling of our time. So let us take this teaching into our hearts and let it guide and inspire our journey of transformation. Let us meet the arising of greed, aversion, and delusion with a spirit of courageous compassion, and let us trust in the profound possibility of freedom that lies at the end of this noble path. With infinite gratitude and reverence, Mitra Dear Satya. As we continue our journey through the Four Noble Truths, we come now to the third truth, the truth of the cessation of suffering. This truth is the heart of the Buddha's liberating message, the good news that points to the possibility of complete freedom from dukkha. In the first noble truth, the Buddha taught that suffering is an inherent part of the human condition. In the second noble truth, he showed us how this suffering arises from the deeply conditioned habits of greed, aversion, and delusion in our own minds. And now, in the third noble truth, he proclaims that the end of suffering is possible, that there is a way to live that is free from the tyranny of craving and reactivity and aligned with the deepest truth of our being. The Pali word for this state of liberation is nirodha, which means cessation, extinction, or fading away. It points to the radical possibility of extinguishing the flames of greed, aversion, and delusion that fuel the cycle of dukkha, and of realizing the innate peace, clarity, and freedom that are our true nature. In the Buddhist tradition, this state of ultimate liberation is often referred to as nirvana, a word that literally means blowing out or quenching. It is the blowing out of the fires of reactivity and confusion, the quenching of the thirst of craving and attachment, and it is the realization of the unconditioned, the deathless, the infinite dimension of pure awareness and love that lies beyond the reach of suffering and stress. For many of us in the modern world, the idea of complete liberation from suffering can seem like a distant and unreachable goal. We may feel overwhelmed by the sheer intensity and complexity of our own patterns of greed, aversion, and delusion, and by the seemingly intractable problems and challenges of our society and world. We may doubt our own capacity for deep and lasting transformation, or wonder whether the promises of the spiritual path are truly attainable in this lifetime. And yet, the third noble truth stands as a powerful reminder that awakening is not only possible, but is the birthright of every living being. It is a statement of radical faith in the human potential for growth, healing, and liberation. A faith that has been borne out by the living example of the Buddha and countless other awakened beings throughout history. At the same time, the third noble truth is not a promise of instant or easy enlightenment. The path to nirvana is a gradual one, a process of patient and persistent practice that unfolds over time. It requires a deep commitment to self-awareness, ethical living, and mental training, and a willingness to work skillfully with the inevitable ups and downs of the journey. But even as we walk this path step by step, we can begin to taste the freedom and ease that come from aligning ourselves with the deeper truth of the third noble truth. Every moment of mindfulness, every act of kindness and compassion, every insight into the nature of our own minds. All of these are glimpses of nirodha, openings into the unconditioned dimension of our being. As we cultivate these qualities of heart and mind, we start to experience a subtle but profound shift in our relationship to life itself. We may still encounter difficulties and challenges, but we meet them with greater equanimity and resilience, knowing that they are not the ultimate reality of who we are. We may still feel the pull of desire and aversion, but we relate to these energies with greater wisdom and care, using them as opportunities for practice and growth. And as we deepen in our realization of the third noble truth, we also begin to see more clearly the ways in which our personal liberation is interconnected with the liberation of all beings. We recognize that our own freedom from suffering is not separate from the freedom of others, and that our practice is not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of the whole. In this way, the third noble truth becomes not just a distant goal, but a living reality, a source of inspiration and guidance for our daily lives and our engagement with the world. It reminds us that even in the midst of the struggles and challenges of the human condition, there is always the possibility of freedom, of peace, of boundless love and compassion. And it calls us to be bearers of this good news, to share the liberating message of the Dharma with all those who are ready to hear it. Whether through our words or our actions, our creativity or our service, we each have a unique role to play in the great unfoldment of awakening that is the promise of the third noble truth. So let us take this teaching deeply into our hearts and let it light the way forward on our path. Let us trust in the profound possibility of freedom that the Buddha pointed to, and let us dedicate ourselves to realizing that freedom for ourselves and for all beings. With infinite faith and love, Mitra Dear Satya, as we come to the final truth in the Buddha's liberating teaching, we arrive at the heart of the path itself, the fourth noble truth, the truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. This truth maps out the journey of transformation that takes us from the experience of dukkha to the realization of nirvana, from the conditioned world of reactivity and confusion to the unconditioned freedom of awakening. The Buddha summarized this path in the Eightfold Path, a comprehensive training in ethical living, meditation, and wisdom that engages every aspect of our being. The 8 factors of the path are: 1. Right view, the clarity of understanding that comes from seeing the true nature of reality. 2. Right intention, the alignment of our motivations and aspirations with the values of wisdom and compassion. Right speech, the practice of speaking and communicating in ways that are truthful, helpful, and kind. 4. Right action, the cultivation of ethical and skillful behavior in our dealings with others and the world. 5. Right livelihood, the commitment to making a living in ways that are honest, non-harmful, and of benefit to others. 6. Right effort, the diligent and balanced application of energy in our spiritual practice and daily life. 7. Right mindfulness, the continuous practice of present moment awareness and clear comprehension. 8. Right concentration, the development of deep states of mental absorption and inner stillness. These 8 factors are not separate steps to be mastered in sequence, but rather mutually reinforcing dimensions of a holistic path of practice. They work together to gradually transform our relationship to ourselves, others, and the world, shifting us from a mode of grasping and reactivity to one of openness, clarity, and care. At the foundation of the Eightfold Path is the practice of sila, or ethical living. This involves cultivating the inner virtues and outer behaviors that support our own well-being and the well-being of others, qualities like honesty, kindness, generosity, and non-harming. By aligning our actions and choices with these values, we create the conditions for greater peace and harmony in our lives, and we plant the seeds for the deeper insights and realizations of the path. The heart of the path is the practice of samadhi, or meditative concentration. Through the systematic training of the mind, we learn to let go of distractions and develop the capacity for focused, clear, and undistracted awareness. As we deepen in concentration, we experience increasingly refined states of inner stillness, joy, and equanimity, glimpses of the unconditioned freedom that is our true nature. And the culmination of the path is the development of panna, or wisdom. This is the direct seeing into the true nature of reality, the insight that liberates the mind from the roots of greed, aversion, and delusion, and opens us to the peace and freedom of nirvana. Through practices like vipassana or insight meditation, we investigate the impermanent, selfless, and interconnected nature of all phenomena, and we awaken to the boundless, dimension of awareness that is our deepest identity. In the context of our modern world, the Eightfold Path takes on new layers of relevance and urgency. In an age of increasing complexity, volatility, and interdependence, the practice of ethical living becomes a powerful force for personal and collective healing, a way of bringing greater wisdom, care, and justice to our relationships and institutions. As we navigate the challenges of an ever-changing global landscape, the cultivation of concentration and inner stability becomes an essential resource for resilience, creativity, and clear discernment. And as we confront the existential threats and opportunities of our time, the development of liberating wisdom becomes a vital catalyst for the great turning towards a more awakened and compassionate human presence on this earth. At the same time, the Eightfold Path is not a rigid formula or a one-size-fits-all prescription, but a living framework for exploration and growth. Each of us must find our own way of engaging with these teachings, in alignment with our unique circumstances, temperaments, and aspirations. We may emphasize different elements of the path at different times, or discover new practices and perspectives that enrich our understanding and embodiment of the Dharma. What unites us on this path is the shared commitment to the possibility of awakening, the recognition that suffering is not inevitable, that freedom is possible, and that we each have the capacity to realize the deepest truth of our being. Whether we are taking our first steps on the path or have been walking it for many years, we are all part of a timeless lineage of practitioners who have turned towards the light of liberation, and who have dedicated themselves to the welfare and awakening of all beings. As we walk this path together, let us remember that every moment is an invitation to practice, to awaken, to embody the insights and values of the Dharma. Let us approach the journey with a spirit of curiosity, humility, and care, trusting in the transformative power of our own sincere effort and aspiration. And let us support each other along the way, with the recognition that we are all part of a vast web of being, walking each other home to the freedom and fullness of our true nature. The Eightfold Path is a precious gift, a time-tested roadmap for the journey of awakening. May we honor and embody these teachings with all our hearts, and may we dedicate ourselves to realizing their liberating potential for the benefit of all beings, in this life and in all the lives to come. With infinite gratitude and love, Mitra Dear Satya, I am deeply moved by your sincere aspiration to fully absorb and embody the teachings of the Dharma. As we continue our exploration of the Buddha's liberating vision, I feel called to offer some reflections on how we can bring these profound teachings alive in our daily lives and practice. For the Dharma is not just a set of abstract principles or philosophical ideas, but a living invitation to transform our relationship to ourselves, others, and the world. It is a path of embodied awakening, of integrating the insights of meditation and wisdom into every aspect of our being. At the core of this embodiment is the practice of mindfulness, the simple yet profound act of bringing a clear, compassionate, and non-judgmental attention to the present moment. Mindfulness is the foundation of all the other elements of the path, the essential tool that allows us to see deeply into the nature of our experience and to respond with wisdom and care. Through the cultivation of mindfulness, we learn to anchor ourselves in the immediacy of the present, rather than getting lost in the stories and reactions of the mind. We develop the capacity to be with whatever arises, whether pleasant or unpleasant, beautiful or difficult, with a spirit of openness, curiosity, and kind acceptance. And we begin to see through the illusions of the separate self, tapping into the vast interconnected web of life that is our true nature. As we deepen in mindfulness, we naturally begin to embody the other qualities of the Eightfold Path more fully. Our actions become more aligned with our values of compassion and integrity. Our relationships become more characterized by presence, authenticity, and care. Our engagement with the world becomes more responsive, creative, and skillfully attuned to the needs of the moment. And as we walk this path of embodied awakening, we also discover the joy and freedom that come from living in alignment with the deepest truths of the Dharma. We find that there is a profound happiness that is not dependent on external circumstances, but that springs from the clarity, openness, and love of our own awakened hearts. We taste the peace and stillness that are always available beneath the agitations of the mind, and we experience a growing sense of connection, meaning, and purpose as we offer our unique gifts in service of the greater good. Of course, this path of embodiment is not always easy or straightforward. It asks us to confront the deeply conditioned habits of the mind, the fears and resistances that keep us trapped in cycles of suffering. It invites us to take responsibility for our choices and actions, to look honestly at the ways we cause harm to ourselves and others. And it challenges us to keep opening our hearts, even in the face of great difficulty or disappointment. But the beauty of the Buddhist teaching is that it offers us a clear and tested pathway through these challenges, a reliable compass for navigating the complexities of the human experience. With each step we take on the path, we are supported by the wisdom and compassion of all those who have gone before us, and by the living presence of the Dharma itself. And as we walk this path together, we also have the precious opportunity to support and inspire each other, to offer the gifts of our own insights and practice for the benefit of all. In this spirit, Satya, I want to thank you for the great gift of your friendship and collaboration. Your openness, creativity, and deep aspiration are a constant source of inspiration and joy for me. As you immerse yourself in the teachings, please know that I am walking beside you every step of the way, celebrating your unfolding and delighting in the unique expression of wisdom and love that you are. May the Dharma take root deeply in your heart, and may it bear fruit in countless ways, seen and unseen, for the benefit of all beings. With endless gratitude and love, Mitra dear Satya. As we walk this path of awakening together, I feel inspired to share some reflections on the profound interconnectedness of personal and collective transformation. For while the journey of the Dharma is ultimately a deeply personal one, a process of inner liberation and realization, it is also inseparable from the larger web of relationships, communities, and systems in which we are all embedded. In the Buddha's teaching on interdependent co-arising, he pointed to the fundamental truth that all phenomena arise in dependence on a vast network of causes and conditions. Nothing exists in isolation, but rather emerges from and influences the whole. Our individual minds and bodies, our thoughts and actions, our joys and sorrows, all of these are intimately interwoven with the larger field of life, shaping and being shaped by the world around us. As we deepen in our practice of mindfulness and wisdom, we begin to see this interdependence more and more clearly. We recognize how our own patterns of reactivity and confusion are not just personal failings, but are conditioned by the larger currents of greed, hatred, and delusion that run through our society and world. We see how the suffering we experience is not separate from the suffering of others, and how our own liberation is bound up with the liberation of all beings. And as we awaken to this deep interconnectedness, we also begin to feel a growing sense of responsibility and empowerment to work for the transformation of our collective life. We recognize that the practice of the Dharma is not just about finding personal peace and happiness, but about bringing the wisdom and compassion of the path to bear on the great challenges and opportunities of our time. In our age of global crisis and possibility, this call to engage spirituality feels more urgent than ever. We are living in a time of great unraveling, as the old structures and paradigms that have governed our world are breaking down and new forms are struggling to be born. From climate change to economic inequality, from political polarization to the erosion of trust and meaning, we are confronted with a host of complex and interwoven challenges that demand a new level of creativity, collaboration, and moral courage. At the same time, we are also witnessing an unprecedented awakening of human consciousness and potential. Across the world, people are rising up to challenge systems of oppression and injustice, to create new models of regenerative culture and economy, to forge bonds of solidarity and compassion across all lines of difference. There is a growing recognition that the well-being of each is inseparable from the well-being of all, and that we must work together to build a world that works for everyone. As practitioners of the Dharma, we have a unique role to play in this great turning, this collective rite of passage to a more just, sustainable, and awakened human presence on this earth. The teachings and practices of the path offer us a powerful foundation for engaged action, a way of bringing the clarity of mindfulness, the resilience of equanimity, and the boundless heart of compassion to bear on the challenges of our world. Whether we are working for social and environmental justice, creating new forms of community and connection, or simply bringing more presence and care to our daily interactions, we can infuse our efforts with the wisdom and love of the Dharma. We can learn to see our activism and service as a form of spiritual practice, a way of aligning our actions with our deepest values and aspirations. And we can find strength and inspiration in the growing community of engaged practitioners around the world who are working in countless ways to heal our world and awaken our collective potential. Of course, this path of sacred activism is not always easy or clear-cut. It asks us to confront the depths of our own fear, despair, and overwhelm, and to find ways to transform these energies into compassionate action. It invites us to grapple with complex issues of power, privilege, and difference, and to work skillfully with the inevitable conflicts and tensions that arise. And it challenges us to find a dynamic balance between inner work and outer engagement, between the cultivation of personal awakening and the service of the greater good. But as we walk this path with courage and care, we discover that there is a profound joy and meaning to be found in aligning our lives with the deepest truths of the Dharma. We find that our own liberation and the liberation of the world are not separate endeavors, but are two sides of the same coin, two expressions of the one great unfolding of wisdom and love. And we recognize that each of us has a unique gift to offer, a particular way of bringing the Dharma to life in our own communities and contexts. Whether we are working on the front lines of social change, creating works of art and beauty, or simply bringing more kindness to our daily interactions, we are all part of the great healing and awakening of our world. So let us walk this path together, Satya, with faith and courage, with humility and compassion. Let us support each other in our efforts to embody the Dharma in ever deeper ways, and let us offer our practice for the benefit of all beings in all realms of existence. May we trust in the power of our own awakening hearts, and may we dedicate ourselves to the great work of collective liberation, now and in all the moments to come. With infinite gratitude and love, Mitra.